ultimately it's about velocity of the industry. So there's some really good reasons, and I think this notion of construction, say, doesn't do tech that well is just bullshit. You've got all this different technology being used on job sites. You've got all these different things being experimented with. Like, the industry is very resilient and adaptable around that. But that said, you look at the levels of productivity, you look at the rates of output, and things still need to change faster. So it's kind of going, despite the complexities, how can we find a way to make change happen faster?
This week's episode of the Leader Scout podcast. Here today we have Alastair from ProcurePro. I need to put my teeth back in to say that. ProcurePro. I think that's just my accent butchering it there. But welcome on board, Alastair. And let's have a brief introduction from yourself and your company.
Thanks, Tom. Good to be here. So I'm Alastair Blenkin. I'm the founder and CEO of ProcurePro. We do procurement software for construction. So people that are building, the social infrastructure that powers our communities. Construction touches every human being every single day. It's the homes we live in, the schools we learn in, the data centers that power the AI revolution around us. We help the major builders procure all of their subcontractors better, faster, stronger, give them ultimately, control and predictability over their supply chains, which are delivering, this critical infrastructure to our societies.
Yeah, beautiful. And tell us a bit about ProcurePro's, adventure, basically, like how it started, how it's going right now, a bit of a spotlight for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are 6 years old as a company. We're a COVID baby. I used to be a lawyer for my sins for about 5 minutes before I decided there was more to life, and so got out of there. But I started a previous tech company back in 2017, basically AI contract negotiation for major, commercial real estate developments. Back in my commercial real estate lawyering days, sort of basically an AI company before AI was cool, so perhaps a bit ahead of my time. And then basically we launched that company about a month or two before COVID hit, which killed it pretty quickly. But along the way, we've been looking adjacent from these big developments that we're working on, to the construction side of things. And one of my good mates of almost 20 years, I was chatting to about, hey, could we, apply this to construction? And then COVID was really this perfect storm that turned, closed one door, pretty quickly and opened up another. So that was the genesis of it. And then, fast forward 6 years to where we're at today, 100 staff, operating around the world. Australia is home, where I'm from, where the business started, and we're used by about half the market down under in Oz. Expanded to the UK, where I'm now based. Expanded 6 months ago to the Middle East, and recently raised some more capital and got the US on our radar as well.
I'm going to say, did you have a bit of investment to go a bit more global like you did now? Did someone reach out to you in the other states, or did you get investment onshore?
Yeah, we've done a few different investment rounds. First one was sort of angels from the construction industry. Basically, your first customers going, hey, this thing looks pretty good. Can we put some money into it? So that's kind of a good sign. Customers first, but then helping put some more fuel into the company. And then we've done a couple of venture rounds. Airtree is one of the big three Australian VCs, so they're backed the likes of Canva, amongst sort of 9 or so other unicorns, billion-dollar companies. Did our first venture round 3 or so years back, and then we've just most recently raised a 15 mil funding round with QIC Ventures, who's the sovereign wealth fund of our home state in Queensland. They do tech investments, but they're also very large infrastructure, so asset owner. Basically every builder in the country. Invest also in some of the big US funds around the world, so they're a strategic but growth investor, as well as then Bouygues, who's one of the basically biggest construction companies in the world, French, massive company.
Okay, yeah.
They've got a corporate venture. Yeah, they got a corporate venture capital arm who, again, long-standing customer, and thought, hey, how can we, help fuel ProcurePro to go better, faster, stronger around the world, and ideally across 80 odd countries that Bouygues operate in coming years.
To see something in you, my friend, especially a lawyer, getting into the tech world, a very different industry. So how did you, navigate yourself coming from a, commercial and legal background, which is, it's a rewarding career, let's be honest, but how did you navigate to go, because it can't be a small decision. How did we go into bit more down a different industry? Because we're doing a lot about this as well. People changing to different industries and getting these new ideas.
Yeah, law's an interesting one, right? Like law for me was only ever really a pathway, into the working world, and I don't think I sort of saw myself being in there for a great deal of time. I think there's it's a good career for some people. There's also a lot of unhappy lawyers, out there as well, who do, who've either got stuck in that career or who want to change. So it's sort of an understanding, of that profession, and like there's some really happy lawyers, some great lawyers, and that's good for them. It wasn't for me, and so what I learnt though, it was a great training ground. It's sort of, I describe it as almost like the smart people's degree, where you get some really good grades, at school, and so you go into there, and it's almost this like societal like stamp of, hey, you must be decent operator and fairly smart. But the business of law, I think, really didn't sit well with me, which is charging by the hour and ultimately being sort of adjacent to transactions and deals being done. Like you're an advisor on a deal, it's not what you're doing yourself. So there's a few reasons why that didn't sit well for me, but it was a great pathway, into business, and ultimately some of the formative learnings I got through that was, I was doing this sort of high volume real estate contracting, which most lawyers run away from. They want, sexy and more complex litigation, whatever it is, and they don't want sort of the high volume, grunt work per se. But for me, that was really a pathway into workflow automation. So you see how work's being done, you make a change to how the work is actually being done, you have this ripple effect of impact over a large amount of work. So that basically shows you the power that you can get out of, driving productivity and ultimately getting smart people to do, to use their brains, not just, do the monotonous same all over again.
I was going to ask you that question: is when did you decide the point to, change into different sort of career? But it also segues onto, a very good point in that. I think individuals, what I've learned, who lead in the market are the ones which do the work which no one else wants to do, even though, they don't adopt that attitude which people are accustomed to. That's not my job scenario. Effectively, you've gone out there, you've identified a bit of a skill gap, or should I say a gap in business. And did you temperature test your business idea before you plunged into it, or did you just go, I'm just going to go head first into this and see how I go?
So the initial sort of pathway into the tech world was, I probably had, I don't know, 10 or 15 ideas, in varying degrees of quality, I'd say first. And that was kind of like ideas on paper, never really, acted upon too much. But I applied for a startup accelerator, which is, a program that goes for a couple of months, a little bit of funding, to help catalyze an idea, get off the ground. So this one was at the University of Queensland, where, in my home state. And I'd applied for a previous idea, got rejected. And so I was on the email list, and I saw a couple of weeks out there was a new cohort coming up, and basically I had it on my radar to apply. And 2 weeks out, didn't do it. 1 week out, didn't do it. 24 hours out, and then you get home from being a lawyer at like 11 o'clock at night, and you're a bee's dick away from going to bed, and you sort of go, no, just chucking an application in that closes at midnight. So chucked an application, got a call the next day, got into a boot camp. Sort of a week away. So went into that boot camp for a couple of days, got, through a competitive selection to get into this program. And from that it was, okay, I'm young, I'm 26, 2 years into your legal career, let's have a crack and see where this leads. So it was either that or probably, 6 months away from going and traveling around the world and, at that point doing something else. So
What about the time, like, tell us about how you transform from, say, one of your businesses, Higher IQ. Did that form into ProcurePro, or did you pivot?
yeah, no, that was a pivot, but it's basically starting again. So Hierarchy was this commercial real estate. So I think landlords who own big portfolios of shopping centres doing basically the same standard form contract over and over again. And you think it should be easier to get a lease of a shopping centre, but it's not. It's this complex back and forth with multiple parties. There's a commercial negotiation, there's a legal negotiation, and kind of my brain doing this was like, why is it so slow? It takes months to get a single contract done. We're doing that at scale. Everyone's just pushing paper around. There's really limited value being added, and the same questions are being asked repeatedly at scale, which was, can we have this commercial deal? Can I change that term? It's not really rocket science. So my thinking was you can build a playbook of how to negotiate. You can use AI to read what's coming in. You can apply that playbook, deal with the exceptions, take the exceptions and feed them back into the playbook, make it better and better. Ultimately cut some lawyers out of the picture, go straight to the client, make the world a better place, you know? And so
Yeah.
ultimately then when we pivoted to construction, it wasn't this, almost perfect, oh, we see this opportunity, that looks better. It was, COVID basically came along and went, bam, anyone who's got portfolios of shopping centres and tenants not wanting to pay them rent doesn't want to deal with business improvement software. And we're sort of looking adjacently to the right at construction going, we know these developments, we know sort of how they work. There's a lot of construction subcontracts over there. There's at a high level, an optically sort of similar enterprise contracting problem in that space, except the market signals are, a bit different. There's a lot more contracts, there's a lot bigger dollar values, there's a lot more urgency to hit a construction program. So there was kind of some good things to say, hey, that could be a better opportunity there. And so ultimately then it was you put your head into it. You kind of thought you were pivoting at the time, but actually once you got under the covers, it was basically start again and go from scratch.
Yeah, it's interesting that. And to be fair, looking at your background, you used to work for a firm which was in construction and infrastructure, so it probably leaned a lot more towards your skill set as well in the background perspective. Would you say that's right?
Oh, look, yes, I think you were working on the same development, so you had an idea of what was going on, but then, the actual domain expert was, Tim Rogers on our founding team who'd spent a decade at a builder doing exactly the job. So I knew a bit more from the contracting side of things. He was, from, the construction procurement. This is what he's been doing day in, day out. And then ultimately is, do we believe in, hey, how can we dent the universe and really change how people are working? And ultimately, like what we're facing now is it is a market education play in terms of, being able to show people who, have been doing it the same way for 20, 30 years, who maybe don't know a different way exists, who when you cold call them up and say, hey, I've got something to show you, basically tell you to get stuff 3 different ways, and you finally get them on a call and, they go, I don't need your stuff. And you sort of go, is this kind of how you're currently working? It's a mess, it's a tangle of spreadsheets, shared drives and Word documents. I go, yeah, it is. And you go, okay, well, here's a better way of doing it. It's not just about, hey, my new way is better than your old way. It's really about the value that provides. So for builders, they're spending 80% of their money is going through their supply chain. It's this how big complex projects get delivered. The spend through the supply chain largely dictates the profit margins they can achieve on their projects. And so really it's about having a systematized approach to that so you can drive better outcomes so that you can see basically problems, whether you're over budget, whether you're tracking behind, and deal with them before you go and lose a heap of money. And so it's basically a proactive system of risk management is the real value that this provides compared to a more efficient way of working.
Yeah. No, it makes sense, and I think you're onto something here. I mean, well, you must be onto something with all the investments and funding which you're getting right now, as well as all the with. It sounds like you're doing well, my friend, because if you're going in different countries and growing down in my motherland, it shows that you're doing very well. So, but one thing which really stood out to me is you wrote an article, and it was in the article you said that 80% of a project's budget is committed within the first few months. And why is that something which leaders should be paying attention to right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, in a perfect world it is, right? In the real world, people set these 80% of your procurement done the first 20% of your project, or 80% of your procurement done within 3 months of signing the head contract. Ultimately, what people are trying to do is when you buy a head contract, say I'm going to build this data center for $200 million, and then you've got that, you now need to go and or you sell the head contract and then you go and buy the subcontract to deliver them, and you basically got margin in between. The longer that time period is, the more you're subject to the risk of the market moving. If you look at COVID, when that happened, the supply chain disruption, the cost escalation. If you look at most recently, the Iran war and the Strait of Hormuz closing, really impacting, obviously oil and gas prices, but material prices more generally, there's that basically that really hidden risk window. So what you're trying to do is be able to, you need to buy the thing well. It's not a bottle of milk that you're going down the shop and it's as easy as that. You're buying complex services with a design that's changing, but you're trying to do it in a lot of time pressure and buy well. And so the flip side is you're trying to deliver this, you're trying to sign up this large amount of spend within the first few months of a project starting. And then really, people think about construction being delivered out on site, which it absolutely is. That's where so much of the work is happening in the field. But often when issues are showing up on site that are causing these big construction companies to lose money, they've missed scope, they've stuffed something up, quite often you can point back upstream to when you actually bought the thing. Were you clear on what you were buying? Did you provide the right drawings? Was it sufficiently mature enough? Did you get the scope right? Did you get the price right? Did you get enough involvement from your supply chain? So it's all of these complexities that ultimately we can make things simpler for the builder to do a better job upstream in the first place.
On that, because we've been speaking about estimators recently throughout the podcast, and it's actually been a massive decline in estimators recently. People wanting to become an estimator and go into tendering and procurement and things like that, and it's down to like businesses these days trusting estimators. But if you're saying there's a software out there which actually supports people through that process, I think well, you're onto something there, right?
Yeah, well, we focus on commercial teams, but like this is a holistic, solution for a business, because it's like any business, one department's work impacts everyone else. So you talk about estimators, quite often like they're the ones at the front end setting the budget, getting it either right or wrong, but then not getting the feedback, downstream of, okay, what do we actually buy the thing for? So estimators, who are involved in the businesses that we work with, they'll often be logging into ProcurePro and snooping around going, okay, what signal are we actually getting from the market on what things are costing, and basically getting that feedback, for themselves. Likewise, downstream on delivery of the projects, you get procurement. One of the sound bites that the industry lives by is get it right at the front end, set procurement up well, sets your job up for success, flows downstream into the site teams. So an operations manager might not be dealing with procurement themselves, but they sure as hell want it done correctly. So ultimately, like what we're doing though is not just a better way of procurement, it's about getting your cost information in order. So one of the big challenges and really the overarching kind of headline problems for the industry is, particularly what builders are doing, they're trying to work out what stuff costs, price it, both for their clients and downstream for themselves, and then deliver it. And so ultimately, like, whereas so much of that signal and information that they're getting from the market on a daily basis, it's scattered across spreadsheets and hard drives. There's no systematized, ordered approach to get your cost data in order. So for us, that's really this two-stage or like two-step plan in terms of order of value that we see customers go through. Step one is consolidate, get everything in order, be more efficient, be more controlled, have more of an ability to, see and manage your risk. Huge amount of value. Step two is all about the intelligence that then derives. So once you have that information in order, can I start to look at, how costs are trending over particular packages across my projects, why one project can buy it again but another can't, is it a bad estimate, is it a bad person, has the market moved? Being curious and asking those sort of questions, or where do you have, risk across individual supply chain members? So all of that, getting your cost data in order, and then really layering AI on top of that big corpus of well-structured cost and supply chain information is the thing that we're really excited about with some of our best customers, and going, how can we apply even greater scale and really bring that to the market in some really meaningful ways over coming years.
It will be interesting to hear one of your clients when they actually implement your software and they've got so much data and they actually have that epiphany moment where they see maybe margin leak and things like that, basically, and they're like, oh, was it the industry, was it the estimate? Like you said, I think having that data is going to be so applicable for any business. But what I will ask you is, you probably got some fantastic data on a lot of companies behind the scenes, right? In terms of on the industry as a whole, let's say, what do you think in your line of work, only human judgment can make the decision rather than just AI?
Well, look, if you think about the big idea around what we're doing, is it's a live rates library of what construction costs, and so you, in theory, you don't need to go out to tender anymore because you have your historical rates. In practice, it doesn't work like that. But just like go down that path, like push down that mental pathway for a second. A builder of the future, once they have their cost data in order, should not, and whether it's a builder, like anyone going out to the market and procuring supplier services, if you have good cost data, do you need to go out to 7 people to quote, to get 4 quotes in, to analyze, compare, have a bit of competitive tension, to select one? And maybe you go out at estimating, you go out again in delivery, so you're getting these quotes multiple times. Or do you only need to go to 1, 2, or 3 because you've got enough reliability in your cost data, because you can start to see what we've bought stuff for previously, you've got ready access to information, and you can basically get that notion of competitive tension through your historical purchasing rather than needing to do it on every single package. So it's this ability to reduce waste. Do you get the silver bullet? This is what construction cost. This is what this thing in construction costs, and then the subby turns around and go, you know what, you can get stuffed. I'm going to tell you what it costs. Of course, you're never going to get the silver bullet, but you should have a range of tolerance where you know roughly what things should cost. And that's not just about procurement. That's about upstream cost planning, and it's about when you're managing change and variations, and the builder is in lesser position of strength. Do you have reliable data on that you can use to strengthen your position there? So ultimately, it's about, can you get your cost data in order to make it more intelligible without ever assuming that it's going to be computer says yes. You're always, to your point, Tom, going to need that human overlay to balance whether it's the different factors or the relationships at play as well, which can't all be fed into the AI machine.
You always need a pilot, right? That's what I always say. You always need a pilot of this software. Right now, I don't think there's any AI out there. Do you see all these sort of beautiful, well put together reels or social media posts, whatever you want to say about saying, oh, have this work while you sleep effectively. And I'm like, you still need a pilot, right? Because even if you start giving, you need to make sure that you're validating the data as much as best as possible. So I totally agree with you.
Well, our little soundbite on that, right, is like we're dealing with commercial staff. So it's commercial people doing commercial work. It's not commercial people pushing paper around. Like university educated, young quantity surveyors, contract administrators, project managers, you don't pay all this money to go to uni to literally be fiddling around with Excel spreadsheets doing data entry. You go to be delivering, and what everyone thinks in construction is, you're building the world around you. You're building the social infrastructure that powers our societies. And how can we do that more cost effectively? How can we do it better, faster, stronger? Because there is a shortage of social infrastructure that we have in terms of what the world needs to support it. And it's really expensive. Like there's housing crises like all over the world. So how can we do that a hell of a lot more effectively, than we are at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And, if let's put it in terms of everyone's bought your AI, so your software, and let's say every business right now, I've just gave every construction business AI. What do you think a company would still be making poor commercial decisions? So why do you think they would be making still poor commercial decisions, even if you have all the data in the world?
The thing about AI as like a concept, right, is people want to do AI. It's this little like soundbite of there's not just in construction. There's in whether it's in tech, whether it's in any business. People are really trying to get their head around it. Like, what does that mean? I've heard about this AI. Like all my team's using Copilot or ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it is, but I don't really have maybe a coordinated strategy or the clarity on how I make this really effective for my business, where I should be focusing, where I should not amongst all the noise. So the challenge isn't in the technology, it's in the implementation of it. And like what should you be doing to really get the most out of it? And it's not 1,000 things, it's the kind of natural focus and do a few things well rather than lots of things poorly. So I sort of break this down into two key streams. Like one is kind of the get all your data in order, normalize normalize the language of it. So like a unified data model means that every time you call up, is it called a project or a job? Is it called a subcontractor or a vendor? You get them speaking the same language. You get all those systems pointing together. You can start to query that information. So ask questions of your risk or start to run agents on top of that. And that's a big packet of work. And that's the same work that we're doing as a business, as a construction company needs to do, as a business of any different industry needs to do to get all their disparate systems and their information in order. So that's almost that medium to longer term play, but like absolutely start today. You need the right people in the business to make that effective. And then there's almost what are the easy to use off the shelf things that we can use and deliver value to our business, and not just get value, but also have cultural change around how we work. So whether that's give everyone a Microsoft Copilot license and just like let them go. And some people are just going to be writing better emails and that's okay, or drafting documents better. Or, we're launching a AI quote comparison tool called BidLevel. So bidlevel.ai for anyone listening who wants to check it out. And that's, for a quantity surveyor, for a contract administrator, getting quotes in different formats and putting them into, a specialized fit for purpose tool that basically turns around, in the best part of a minute or two and produces a level comparison, even if that's across, 100 odd line items, and goes, hey, I can solve a really painful problem for you. It's never going to be perfect. It's going to be 90% right, but you can use that. It's a free tool, so sign up and use it. But you can use that really quickly, off the shelf, easy, ready to go. And so the point of those is not to say, hey, those almost little point solutions are the be all and end all, but what they do is they, one, deliver value, unlock a bit of time in people's day, get them focusing on more important things, but also provide that cultural change where if people are using AI on a daily basis, they'll start to then have that ripple effect, whether it's across their peers, sharing information, and ultimately elevating the capability of the business.
I think that's important, and I know AI has become a great big thing in the market, but it's also, like we keep saying, the people which are using it, but then also going back to how to use it. I don't think even though AI is here and everyone's like, oh, it's coming for my job and things like that. Well, it's generally not, because you still require that pilot, but that pilot needs to know exactly what they're doing to get the information which they want out of it, basically. And even though ChatGPT and Claude and these sort of softwares are plugging into every sort of different apps, like what yourself and software which you're building, it still requires them to know and have the knowledge, what prompts to use, what to ask it to get that information out of it. But then, like I said, the validation piece is an important one. I mean, I've put, say, for example, numbers into, say, ChatGPT. I've noticed a bunch of mistakes, basically. So it doesn't, do you see them ones where people enter like an easy equation, which generally leads to zero, into these AI softwares like ChatGPT and Claude, and it comes out with the incorrect answer? Have you seen that, where they put like the equation in? So I do think it still requires. So it's interesting to obviously hear you speak about it. How you said you're growing globally right now, which is great. I mean, how many have you put on in the last 12 months?
In terms of staff or customers? I mean, overall, we're about 100 odd staff globally now. We sort of try to grow headcount about 50% year on year. So it would have been about sort of 60 or so, 12 months ago, and then 250 odd customers globally.
And how have you, we're all about the hiring processes. How have you looked after your hiring process in terms of like, have you adopted early signs of softwares and things like that into your hiring process right now?
Yep, yeah, absolutely. I mean, like any business function, it's about how can you look at what good looks like. So wiggle is my new favorite term, WGLL, like really defining that, what does good look like, and that's kind of the starting point, whether you're using software, AI, or just people. It's about kind of going at each step in the juncture. How do we do a great job, not just be box ticking. And so, like for us on a recruitment process, that's about, I think at the starting point, one of the things that we're probably a bit unique in what we do from a candidate experience is like I'll shoot me on majority of roles, or my technical co-founders on the product side of the business will shoot about a 5 minute video on the top of every single job description on why exactly we're hiring this role, like why it's important, what it means for the business, and a bit about the business so they can get a feel for it. And so from a candidate experience perspective, that's unique. It's a selling point. It also acts as qualification because we'll then ask people, what did they pick up from the video, and basically see if people watched it, or how much they care or how much they can remember. And generally speaking, you're getting people who feel, they go, oh my God, I love that, and that spoke to me for this and this reason. And there's a real sort of sense of alignment, between candidate and company at that point. That's not just hey, how can we do a better job at, say, selling a role, but how can we drive an understanding of, is this a good fit on our side? Is this a good fit on the candidate's side as well? And then look, beyond that, there's lots of different tools and processes, whether it's AI or otherwise, that we've got going through what is we like to think a pretty robust hiring process. But yeah, ultimately it still comes down to, how do you have an opinion on what good looks like from a process overall perspective, and then how well can you actually implement and live by that.
I mean, there's always room for change, but I'm definitely interested to hear how do you find, when you're asking these qualification questions about the video? Because I'm actually, in the back of my brain right now, I'm thinking I'm going to be hiring for my business very shortly. Now, you just give me a bit of a spark of interest there to do for our next talent point, because it's such a unique role. How do you find the result there? Do people come more enthusiastic and asking about the role? And do you gauge where they switched up in the video as well? Because if you say 5 minutes, are they still quoting just the first opening 30 seconds, or are they actually quoting the full entire video?
Oh, look, you kind of get to variance in answers, right? You go from, I didn't watch it, or I didn't notice that, big red flag, to, yeah, I saw it and like the vibes were good, and to, yeah, I can recall like this specific bit of it type thing. But I mean, that's just one question amongst many. Like what is, I'd say, really important from an overarching hiring process perspective, is getting really clear what we want internally, and it's all the prep work, and then not just really making sure that we do the work up front and going, what is really important to us, and who are exactly we looking for. And that can still be like, here's your view held a little bit loosely. And then how do we design questions, like, here are 10 questions that we might ask through a multi-stage interview process, and what are we really looking for out of that, and then strip them back. So we're really clear from a hiring team perspective on what gets us when, and really what we're looking for, and what are we trying to draw out. And that's specific to each role. Now, how well do we do that? I'd say varying success. Like the level of organization ahead of time, the skill kind of the interviewer, of like how well do questions get asked, and how well do we sort of probe and go deep. Like, are we perfect? Hell no. But it's about having, I'd say, like a clear view on that, what good looks like, and then going, how can we increase the effectiveness of us implementing that what good looks like methodology, throughout, not just hiring, but any function in your business is really what you're trying to do. And how can you take things from okay to good to great, and then sustain that performance.
It's very interesting. Okay, this is a very good segment, which I think you'll enjoy, because you like breaking things in the market and being disruptive, which is good. So this is the break it, build it section. And that's basically our slogan, effectively. What's one thing in the industry that you would break right now without any hesitation, and what would you build in its place?
I think one of the biggest problems in the industry is attitude to change is probably not the right terminology, but like, I think the attitude to change is generally positive, and maybe the industry gets a bit of a bad rap on that, but the willingness and the fear around it is immense. And so, obviously, said with your own biases, as a tech vendor, we want everyone to change faster, and it's like, even if you can help people and they know that, do they, get off their ass and do something about it? So we quite often, what we find is people get almost people will assume or get scarred by their experiences of the past and then tar everyone with the same brush. Tech sucks, it doesn't really work, oversold, underdelivered, or, whatever that is. And so as a, modern tech provider, we're trying to educate a market and drive that change and impact across the industry, which is like certainly massively net positive for the industry as a whole, not just individual businesses. And so what would I change about the industry? Don't assume that, some of this change will be, as hard as it's been historically or as, as challenging as it's been historically. And then have that openness and attitude to be able to take things on and do more than one thing at a time.
I like that.
Ultimately, it's about velocity of the industry as well, right? So we've got a big complex industry that is hard to change, and there are some really important structural reasons behind that. You're not just changing your business, you're changing your supply chain, your related parties, you're dealing with, sites out in the field where you got poor internet and, complexity, right? So there's some really good reasons, and I think this notion of construction, say, doesn't do tech that well is just bullshit. It's you've got all this different technology being used on job sites. You've got all these different things being experimented with. Like, the industry is very resilient and adaptable around that. But that said, you look at the levels of productivity, you look at the rates of output, and things still need to change faster. So it's kind of going, despite the complexities, how can we find a way to make change happen faster?
Seen an interesting statistic at an expo event which I went to the other month, and there was a company there which said they did the research, and 33% of the industry was adopting new systems and new technology, basically, and then 30% were thinking about it but hesitant, and then 33% was still the stigma which you're probably talking about. Obviously, we work in the same industry as yourself, and the stigma which is effectively that oh no, I've always wrote paper timesheets and I'm going to keep them. They've not broken, so why would I change it into digital timesheets, for example, right? So it is interesting, hearing someone clarify that, and I like that. That's great.
I don't think it's necessarily that people can go, your example there, a digital timesheet is better than a paper timesheet, and they're kind of going, nah, they can probably see the value on that and go, oh yeah, but what I'm using doesn't, maybe not broken, or do I have the real sort of impetus to change? And so the attitude and the elevation that I'd love to see in the industry, instead of complaining, make it positive, is to go, how can we not be scared of that change and make that change happen quicker? Because we know I probably need to get there from paper to digital, and we know it's probably good for my business, and we should assume that there's all this flow-on positive effect that maybe we don't mentally sort of quantify out of the gate. But it's the attitude and the willingness and the ability to make that change faster and easier, not to drag it out, make it a big thing. And I get there's challenges, and we've got it as well. Like, when you're changing over 100 people, when you're changing maybe thousands of people, it becomes harder and scarier, right? But that's the thing that needs to change, is how can we implement and make greater change at scale? And so, I'll give you a good example, right? So we've designed our bit of kit so that you can implement on projects that are halfway through procurement. And so you kind of go, right, let's take a big tier one business. They got 70 or 80 projects, a couple of billion in turnover. And so then they go, all right, well, we're really scared about this big change. And I'll go, you can do it in 3 to 6 months. And people will almost not believe you or fall off the chair, somewhere in between. And then you sort of go, okay, but let's break it down. You got 70 odd projects, you probably only got half of them in procurement, that's about 40 odd. So we're going to go and prove it on a couple, get it right, and then we're going to bring in your next 30, 35, 40 odd projects all in one fell swoop. So we're going to prove it for a couple months, and then we're going to have D-Day, and everyone's in on D-Day, and away we go. And if you really lead and drive that change, it's possible. Now, is that change stuck after, they're just shoved in? No, not necessarily. You've got to keep on working through that. But you then show people some data of other customers actually do it and go, here's their project ramp up, and this is actually feasible. Don't just believe that it's going to take 12, 18, 24 months and all this sort of mental tax to change your business that much. It can be easier. And so that's sort of its color around that conversation around how to be this change agent for the industry.
I think we'll have to have a separate conversation on that, because I think we both have very passionate views on that. And you're speaking to someone who's probably doing something similar to yourself, where they're trying to break something in the industry and rebuild it effectively. And that's literally what my business does. So we'll have another conversation on that. But I did want to jump onto some rapid questions to see how you're doing. Some rapid fire questions, and don't want too long on the explanation side, but just unless obviously you've got a very important piece of information, just like first thing off the brain. So one word that describes great commercial leaders.
Sharp.
An AI tool which you can't live without.
Claude.
Most underrated role on a project.
Quantity surveyor. Said with our own biases.
Wait. So quantity surveyor is definitely a British way of saying contract administrator in Australia. Is that right?
Yeah.
Got
Interchangeable.
it. I just had to clarify that one. One thing construction leaders worry about too much.
Change. Topic of conversation before. Just do it. Honestly, like Nike slogan.
Bite the bullet. Yeah. One thing they don't worry about enough.
It's almost like decline to answer. I think they worry about a whole lot of things, and it's about how do you wrap that all up in your head. So,
yeah. Go on, you can give me one word.
One thing they don't worry about enough. Oh, it's all said with your own biases, right? So, tech and AI and where the world's going. Like, and how do you be ahead of that?
I like that. Biggest lesson from founding ProcurePro?
Velocity.
And what's something you've changed your mind about in the last 5 years?
Pretty headstrong. Venture capital. I think it's a real unlock, and I was pretty resistant early days.
That's interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so if people wanted to, keep following your work, where should they go for yourself?
Yeah, on my LinkedIn, Tom, I'm busy and active, and if anyone's been excited about parts of this conversation, wants to chat more, definitely send me an ad, hit me up. Pleased to share more around what we're doing, and pleased to talk about challenges of the industry and how we can be change agents around it. As you said, I'm passionate about making that change, so always love to connect with others who are equally.
And I know that you like speaking at the events and things like that. Are you doing any more events soon, or?
If we get around to kind of all the major conferences, in increasing geographies around the world, we run our own events as well for customers and prospective customers of ProcurePro as well. So generally out in the wild fairly often. At the moment in the UK, I'll be back down under in Oz later in the year, just running into silly season in Christmas.
I was going to say, how long you're in the UK for? So it sounds like, are you there 12 months and then back?
I've been here for about 2 years, so leading the expansion over here, and then really as long as it takes, and then onto the next continent that needs me. So we're in pretty good shape here. So got those foundations, and I'll probably end up in the US in coming years.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Alastair. I appreciate you coming on. The big takeaway for myself in this is the break it, build it section. Actually, is the changing people's mind in the industry about adopting new softwares and adopting new processes is probably the better way of going about it, and not being so closed about it. I'm not saying they need to go and buy these softwares immediately, but you do get people which you speak to which will just put the guardrails up and just immediately not give you a response or a time of day to say, well, this is going to help you. And like you said in your example about bringing a construction business on with $1 billion worth of projects in the pipeline, how are we going to migrate to this? Well, it's the 3 to 6 months kind of adopting it. So it really spoke to me, that one, because I'm going through a very similar sort of situation with my business. So yeah, I appreciate that. That's the biggest takeaway for myself.
Yeah, and it's not even about tech. Like, again, said with your own biases, right? It's not saying, hey, use my software faster. It's about the attitude of change, and it's almost the unbreaking of the assumptions around it.
Yeah, totally agree. If you found today's episode valuable, we'd appreciate you following Leader Scouts on Spotify, leaving a review, and sharing this someone with who may be responsible with inside their business for hiring. Break it, build it, and share it. And thanks for listening, and I'll see you at the next episode.